In 2016, El Chapo, the world's most feared drug lord, was finally captured, stripped of power, shoved into a cage. No guards, no loyalty, just silence. This video isn't about crime stats. It's about what exactly it feels like when a gang leader walks into jail, alone, exposed, and suddenly human. The arrest. The transformation from street king to county jail number begins long before the cell door slams shut. For gang leaders, the arrest itself represents a psychological earthquake that shakes the very foundation of their identity. These are individuals who have spent years, sometimes decades, cultivating an image of invincibility. They've survived drive-bys, turf wars, and countless confrontations that would break ordinary people. Yet nothing quite prepares them for the moment when their freedom, and with it, their power, evaporates in the span of seconds. Consider the arrest of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in 2016, a man who had escaped from maximum security prisons and evaded capture for years. Despite his legendary status and seemingly unlimited resources, El Chapo's final capture demonstrated how quickly even the most powerful criminals can find themselves powerless. The psychological impact of such moments cannot be overstated. Imagine going from commanding armies of loyal soldiers to being photographed in handcuffs, your mugshot destined to become front-page news worldwide. The emotional turmoil during these moments manifests in various ways. Some gang leaders respond with defiance, maintaining their street persona even as the cuffs tighten around their wrists. Others experience what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental conflict between their self-image as invincible leaders and the stark reality of their sudden powerlessness. Many report feeling a sense of betrayal, not just by informants or rivals who may have contributed to their downfall, but by the very streets that they believed would always protect them. Perhaps most devastating is watching their crew's reaction during the arrest. Some gang leaders describe the silence that falls over their soldiers, men who would typically rush to their aid now frozen by the reality of law enforcement's presence. The flashing lights, the tactical teams, the overwhelming show of force all serve to demonstrate that the streets, no matter how well controlled, ultimately exist within a larger system of power that can assert its dominance at any moment. Entering the jail. The first steps into a county jail represent a sensory assault unlike anything most people can imagine. The metallic clang of doors, the harsh fluorescent lighting that never dims, the antiseptic smell mixed with human desperation. Every element serves as a reminder that these gang leaders have entered a world where their previous rules no longer apply. Elvis Deschamps, a former Trinitario gang leader, describes his first moments entering Clinton Correctional Facility.
It's maximum security. I'm not a gang member at the time. I'm just a neutral 20-year-old kid, because I just turned 20. I'm like 140 pounds, Dominican kid.
Here is someone who had commanded respect on the streets, reduced to describing himself as just another scared young man facing the unknown. That's what it's like for most gang leaders. The intake process itself serves as the first real test of a gang leader's adaptability. Medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and the assignment of prison uniforms all strip away the external markers of their former status. The clothes that once announced their gang affiliation, the jewelry that displayed their wealth, the weapons that enforced their authority, all of it disappears, replaced by standard-issue clothing that makes them indistinguishable from every other inmate. But perhaps the most crucial element of these first moments is the assessment that every experienced gang leader conducts almost instinctively, identifying threats, cataloging potential allies, and calculating the power dynamics that will determine their survival. As Elvis recalled,
As soon as I walk down, it's like this fucking skinny little tier with the cells, and it's just so skinny. I thought it was like TV where it was bigger. I'm like, whoa, that thing is skinny.
the reality of confinement hits harder than expected. The physical space feels smaller, more claustrophobic, more limiting than anything television or movies had prepared them for. The immediate need to establish some form of authority or protection becomes paramount. Larry Hoover, the infamous leader of the Gangster Disciples, reportedly maintained his influence over the organization even from behind bars, demonstrating how some gang leaders successfully transition their street credibility into prison currency. However, this transition is neither automatic nor guaranteed. It requires careful navigation of complex social dynamics that can shift without warning. The first encounter with other inmates is another crucial moment that can define a gang leader's entire incarceration experience. Elvis describes this tension perfectly.
And immediately, this guy pops a mirror out. What's good? Where you from, fam? I'm like, oh, I'm from Long Island. And he's like, oh, all right. Yo, listen, you look young. Don't accept nothing from nobody unless you know them, man.
The psychological pressure of these first interactions cannot be overstated. Gang leaders must quickly determine who to trust, who to avoid, who might become an ally, and who represents a potential threat. Unlike the streets, where their reputation often preceded them, jail represents a reset where they must prove themselves all over again, often to people who may not care about their previous accomplishments or may see them as targets to enhance their own status. The power dynamic. The translation of street credibility into prison currency represents one of the most complex and dangerous aspects of a gang leader's first day behind bars. Unlike the outside world, where reputation, resources, and territorial control can be carefully cultivated over time, jail presents an immediate and unforgiving test of authenticity that can expose any weakness in a leader's armor. The challenge becomes even more complex when considering the existing gang affiliations within the facility. Prisons operate under their own sets of rules, with established hierarchies that may not align with street-level power structures. A gang leader who commanded respect from Bloods and Crips on the outside might find themselves forced to navigate alliances with groups like the Mexican Mafia or Aryan Brotherhood inside, organizations with their own codes, territories, and methods of enforcement. According to research into prison gang dynamics, facilities often become territories divided among different criminal organizations, each with their own sections, rules, and methods of maintaining order. For incoming gang leaders, understanding these invisible boundaries becomes a matter of survival. Cross into the wrong area, show disrespect to the wrong person, or fail to follow established protocols, and violence can erupt without warning. The psychological pressure of maintaining face while learning new rules creates an almost impossible balancing act. Gang leaders cannot appear weak or uncertain. Such displays invite challenges from those seeking to establish their own reputations. Yet they also cannot act with the same aggressive authority they wielded on the streets, as prison systems have established checks and balances that can quickly humble even the most powerful criminals. Some gang leaders attempt to maintain their authority through intimidation and violence, but this approach often backfires spectacularly. Prison guards, unlike street cops, work within the facility daily and have extensive experience dealing with inmates who try to use fear as a tool. Moreover, other inmates have often survived worse situations than anything a new arrival might threaten, making traditional intimidation tactics ineffective and potentially dangerous. The most successful gang leaders understand that prison requires a different skill set entirely. Rather than relying purely on fear and violence, they must develop diplomatic skills, learn to negotiate complex alliance structures, and understand that their survival depends as much on who they avoid fighting as on who they're willing to confront. The first interactions.
Passed me like 3 shampoos, bunch of soap, bunch of stuff. So I'm like, he's giving me something. This guy wants to like rape me or something. That's what I'm thinking in my head, like.
The complexity of interactions in prison lies in their deceptive simplicity. What appears to be basic human kindness, sharing hygiene products with a new arrival, becomes loaded with potential implications in the prison environment. Gang leaders must quickly learn to distinguish between genuine assistance, recruitment attempts, manipulation tactics, and potential threats, often with incomplete information and under enormous psychological pressure. Sudhir Venkatesh's observations of gang leaders like JT provide insight into how these individuals typically handle social dynamics. JT's ability to use charisma and negotiation skills to build alliances translated well to the jail environment, where verbal skills often prove more valuable than physical intimidation. However, this transition requires gang leaders to suppress their instinctive responses and adapt to an environment where different rules apply. The relationship with correctional officers presents another layer of complexity that street-smart gang leaders must navigate carefully. Some guards may specifically target high-profile inmates due to their notoriety, viewing them as opportunities to demonstrate their own authority. Others might be susceptible to corruption, creating opportunities for gang leaders to maintain some influence through bribery or manipulation. However, attempting to corrupt the wrong officer can result in severe consequences that extend far beyond the immediate punishment. Elvis's experience shows how quickly these calculations can go wrong.
And he's like, what's going on? I was like, I don't know you, fam. I don't fuck with you. The fuck out my face. I ain't no punk, cause you think I'm young. And I start like saying everything that's on my mind like an idiot, which is the wrong thing to do in prison. You're supposed to say as least as you can.
The threat of violence lurks beneath every interaction, but the triggers for conflict differ significantly from street encounters. According to prison research, seemingly trivial actions like squinting at another inmate can escalate quickly, demonstrating how heightened tensions and confined spaces can turn minor misunderstandings into major confrontations. Gang leaders accustomed to controlling escalation through their reputation find themselves in situations where their presence alone might provoke rather than prevent conflict. The meal periods represent particularly dangerous social minefields. Gang leaders must navigate seating arrangements that reflect complex alliance structures, understand which conversations are acceptable and which might be viewed as intelligence gathering, and manage their behavior in ways that neither project weakness nor provoke unnecessary confrontation. A simple decision about where to sit can communicate allegiances, challenge established hierarchies, or inadvertently insult powerful individuals. Communication with the outside world becomes another crucial aspect of these first-day interactions. Gang leaders must quickly establish secure methods of maintaining contact with their organizations while avoiding surveillance that could compromise their operations or provide evidence for ongoing prosecutions. The phones, visits, and mail systems all operate under different rules than street communication, requiring immediate adaptation of previously effective methods. The psychological pressure of maintaining their image while learning these new dynamics creates enormous stress. Gang leaders cannot show uncertainty or confusion without inviting challenges, yet they must also avoid the overconfidence that could lead to potentially fatal mistakes. This balancing act requires emotional control and strategic thinking under conditions designed to break down both qualities. The cell. The first night in a jail cell might just be the most psychologically challenging aspect of a gang leader's initial incarceration experience. After years of constant activity, surrounded by loyal crew members and immersed in the continuous demands of running criminal operations, the sudden isolation forces a confrontation with thoughts and fears that street life helped them avoid. The physical reality of the cell itself serves as a stark reminder of how completely their circumstances have changed. Gang leaders accustomed to luxury apartments, expensive cars, and the ability to move freely find themselves confined to spaces often smaller than their former walk-in closets. The thin mattress, the stainless steel toilet, the walls covered in graffiti from previous occupants, every element reinforces their powerlessness and vulnerability. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's experience in solitary confinement provides insight into how even the most powerful criminals struggle with isolation. His reported psychological difficulties during extended periods alone demonstrate that no amount of street credibility can prepare someone for the mental challenges of confinement. For gang leaders facing their first night, the silence becomes deafening after years of constant noise, activity, and social interaction. The absence of their usual support systems creates a psychological vacuum that many gang leaders struggle to fill. Many gang leaders describe using these first nights to attempt communication with their outside organizations, despite the risks involved. Smuggled cell phones, coded messages through legal visits, and signals through family members become lifelines to the power structures they've left behind. However, these communications also come with heavy risks. Discovery could result in additional charges, longer sentences, or placement in restrictive housing that would make survival even more difficult. The psychological weight of their legal situation often becomes overwhelming during these quiet hours. Gang leaders who spent their careers avoiding consequences suddenly face the reality of extended sentences, ongoing investigations, and the possibility that their criminal careers are permanently over. The mental adjustment required is enormous, particularly for individuals who have defined themselves entirely through their criminal success and street reputation. Sleep becomes elusive for many reasons beyond the uncomfortable conditions. Just the fear of being attacked while vulnerable keeps many awake during their first night, and this creates exhaustion that compounds the psychological stress they're already experiencing. The graffiti and messages left by previous occupants serve as both warnings and sources of information. Gang leaders often spend hours studying these communications, trying to decode references to ongoing conflicts, alliance structures, and individuals they should approach or avoid. This informal intelligence gathering represents one of the few advantages they can pursue from within their cells, though the information's reliability remains questionable. The planning that occurs during these isolated hours often determines whether a gang leader will successfully adapt to prison life or become another casualty of the system. Those who use the time to develop realistic strategies for survival, alliance building, and conflict avoidance often fare better than those who spend the night plotting revenge or maintaining unrealistic expectations about their influence within the facility. The gang's response. While gang leaders struggle to adapt to their new reality behind bars, their arrest creates immediate and often chaotic consequences for the criminal organizations they've left behind. The power vacuum created by a leader's incarceration can trigger internal warfare, territorial disputes, and succession battles that sometimes prove more dangerous than any threat the imprisoned leader faces personally. Larry Hoover's situation with the gangster disciples illustrates both the potential for maintaining influence from prison and the inevitable changes that occur when leadership is removed from direct street operations. Despite his life sentence, Hoover allegedly continued to direct organizational activities from behind bars, demonstrating that some gang leaders successfully transition their authority from street corner to cell block. However, this transition requires careful planning, loyal subordinates, and communication methods that can evade law enforcement detection. The immediate aftermath of a gang leader's arrest often starts with a corporate power struggle, but with violence replacing boardroom maneuvering. Lieutenants who previously competed for their leader's attention suddenly find themselves vying for actual control of territories, drug operations, and criminal enterprises worth millions of dollars. These succession battles can transform previously stable organizations into chaotic collections of competing factions. The communication challenges between imprisoned leaders and their street organizations create even more complications. Every phone call is monitored, every visit is observed, and every piece of mail is scrutinized for evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Gang leaders are forced to develop sophisticated codes and communication methods while working within systems designed to prevent exactly this type of coordination. Some organizations prove surprisingly resilient to their leaders' removal, having developed sufficient institutional structure to continue operations without constant oversight. These groups often represent the most sophisticated criminal enterprises, with established protocols for leadership succession and decision-making processes that don't rely entirely on a single individual's authority. However, even the most well-organized criminal groups experience some disruption when their primary leader is removed. The financial implications of a gang leader's arrest can be devastating for both the organization and individual members. Drug supplies must be maintained, territorial disputes must be managed, and ongoing expenses must be covered, all without the leader's direct involvement or access to their personal resources. Many organizations fragment under this financial pressure, with different factions pursuing separate agendas that often conflict with each other. Rival gangs frequently attempt to exploit the instability created by a leader's arrest, viewing it as an opportunity to expand into previously controlled territories or eliminate weakened opposition. These attacks can force the imprisoned leader's organization into defensive positions they're ill-equipped to handle without their primary strategist and decision-maker. The resulting conflicts often escalate beyond what any single arrest would have originally caused. The loyalty of gang members faces its ultimate test when their leader is imprisoned, particularly if the arrest was facilitated by informants within the organization. Suspicion and paranoia can destroy relationships that took years to build, as members question each other's reliability and commitment. For gang leaders attempting to maintain influence from jail, the challenge becomes identifying which subordinates can be trusted with increased responsibility and which might use the opportunity to establish their own independent operations. The inability to directly observe behavior and personally manage relationships makes these decisions extremely difficult and potentially dangerous if incorrect assessments are made. The emotional toll on imprisoned gang leaders watching their life's work potentially disintegrate can be enormous. Many describe feelings of helplessness as they receive reports of territorial losses, organizational conflicts, and the gradual erosion of everything they spent years building. The first night. As darkness falls over the facility, the relative calm of daytime activities gives way to an atmosphere where violence can erupt without warning, and where the decisions made in the next few hours will echo throughout their entire incarceration. The sounds of the jail at night create a psychological soundtrack that many gang leaders find more unsettling than any threat they faced on the streets. The constant noise, shouting from other cells, the metallic clang of doors, footsteps in corridors, the periodic checks by guards, creates an environment where true rest becomes nearly impossible. The establishment of sleeping arrangements becomes another crucial strategic decision that can have lasting implications. Gang leaders must choose cell locations and bunk assignments that provide maximum security while avoiding areas controlled by rival factions. These decisions require intelligence about facility dynamics that may not be readily available, forcing them to make potentially life or death choices with incomplete information. Many gang leaders use the first night to send messages throughout throughout the facility, either through direct confrontation or carefully calculated displays of strength. These actions can establish their reputation within the jail's hierarchy, but miscalculations can also paint targets on their backs or trigger conflicts they're not prepared to handle. The balance between projecting strength and avoiding unnecessary provocation requires sophisticated understanding of prison dynamics. The case of Franklin, a Rollin 60s Crips leader, demonstrates how some gang leaders attempt to maintain their authority through continued criminal activity from behind bars. Franklin allegedly ordered retaliatory killings from jail, showing how the first night can become a launching point for escalated criminal behavior rather than a moment of reflection or reform. Such decisions often result in additional charges and longer sentences, but some gang leaders view them as necessary for maintaining credibility. Communication attempts with outside organizations often intensify during nighttime hours when facility security may be reduced, and when the darkness provides some cover for illicit activities. Gang leaders may attempt to establish contact with their crews, send instructions for handling ongoing operations, or gather information about street developments that could affect their safety inside. The formation of temporary alliances becomes crucial during the first night, as gang leaders identify individuals who might provide protection, information, or strategic advantages. These relationships must be carefully negotiated without appearing desperate or weak, requiring diplomatic skills that many gang leaders have developed through years of managing complex criminal organizations. Sleep, when it comes at all, is often interrupted by the need to assess every sound for potential danger. Gang leaders describe sleeping with one eye open, never fully relaxing their guard, constantly ready for attacks that may or may not materialize. Perhaps most challenging of all is maintaining the mental discipline required for survival while processing the emotional reality of their situation. Gang leaders must suppress feelings of fear, uncertainty, and vulnerability while projecting the confidence and strength necessary to deter potential predators. This emotional compartmentalization becomes exhausting when maintained over extended periods. Often, the first night determines whether a gang leader will adapt successfully to prison life or become another casualty of the system. The bigger picture. The decisions made and relationships formed during a gang leader's first 24 hours in jail create ripple effects that extend far beyond their immediate survival. These initial choices establish patterns, create obligations, and set precedents that can influence their entire incarceration experience, affecting everything from their personal safety to their legal outcomes and their eventual prospects for rehabilitation or return to criminal activity. Larry Hoover's experience with the Gangster Disciples demonstrates how early prison decisions can shape decades of incarceration. According to him, his ability to maintain organizational influence despite life sentences began with strategic choices made during his initial adjustment to prison life. The alliances formed, the authority established, and the communication networks developed during those crucial first days provided the foundation for continued criminal influence that persisted for decades. The cycle of institutionalization often begins during the first day, as gang leaders make choices that commit them to prison-based criminal activity. Interestingly, many gang leaders face longer sentences due to crimes committed in jail to maintain their status. What begins as defensive positioning in the first 24 hours can evolve into aggressive expansion of prison-based operations that dwarf their original street activities. The psychological transformation that occurs during these first 24 hours often proves irreversible. Gang leaders who successfully establish themselves within prison hierarchies frequently discover that their new identity provides more consistent power and respect than their street operations ever did. The structured environment of prison, paradoxically, can offer gang leaders clearer paths to authority and influence than the chaotic uncertainty of street-level criminal activity. Elvis Deschamps' evolution within the Trinitario organization illustrates this transformation perfectly.
So I said, I'm gonna become the leader of this shit. I was like, I'm gonna become the leader of this. I'm gonna bring this to Long Island, and I'm gonna become the Supreme Commander of Long Island.
His strategic thinking during those early days of incarceration laid the groundwork for a prison career that would span nearly 2 decades and eventually extend his influence far beyond the facility walls. The impact on families and communities begins with the power vacuum created on day 1, but extends into generational cycles of criminal activity and incarceration. Perhaps most significantly, the first day often determines whether a gang leader's incarceration represents the end of their criminal career or merely a temporary interruption in their ongoing criminal enterprise. Those who use their initial 24 hours to begin genuine reflection and reform efforts sometimes discover paths away from criminal activity. However, those who spend their first day establishing prison-based operations often find themselves locked into criminal careers that extend far beyond their original sentences. The ripple effects of these first-day decisions continue expanding long after the gang leader completes their sentence, affecting families, communities, criminal organizations, and correctional systems in ways that can persist for decades. Understanding these long-term implications provides crucial insights into why the first day of incarceration represents such a critical moment in the lives of gang leaders and in the broader struggle between criminal organizations and the justice system. This isn't just about one day, it's about a system that either breaks the cycle of criminal behavior or reinforces it through institutional structures that can transform individual survival decisions into generational patterns of crime and incarceration. The choices made during those first 24 hours often determine which outcome becomes reality. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.